Two fake HOA cops forced their way into his house, demanding $5,000 or they'd make his life hell. But they had no idea who they were messing with, and what happened next would destroy their entire scheme. But let's start from the beginning. It all started with that letter. A crisp white envelope slipped into my mailbox, printed with an official-looking HOA logo. Inside was a notice claiming that I had violated community guidelines by having an unapproved structure in my backyard. A fine of $20,500. Not a warning, not a request for clarification, but a direct demand for payment. That was already insane. But the real kicker? My neighborhood doesn't even have an HOA. There's no board, no guidelines, no one to issue fines, which meant someone was lying. I sat down, reread the letter twice, then called the number listed at the bottom. A man named Officer Daniels answered almost immediately. His voice was calm, too calm, smooth, polished, the kind of voice that felt rehearsed. He explained that they had photographic evidence of the violation and suggested that it would be best if we handled the matter quietly. "We can come by later today," he said. "Just a formality. I'm sure we can work something out." It sounded suspicious. Why would an HOA I didn't belong to suddenly appear and demand money? But Daniels was confident, relaxed, as if this was just another day on the job. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them. Later that afternoon, a white pickup truck rolled up to my driveway. Two men stepped out, dressed identically in black polo shirts with a white HOA logo stitched on the chest. No badge numbers, no official identification. Daniels was tall and lean, with short brown hair and mirrored sunglasses that reflected back nothing but cold emptiness. His partner, shorter and bulkier, had a hard scowl etched into his face, like he'd been angry his whole life. Daniels smiled thinly. "Mind if we come in?" My gut twisted. Something about them didn't feel right. They weren't behaving like officials. They were too casual, too confident, like they already knew how this was going to end. I hesitated, standing halfway between the doorway and the living room. Daniels didn't wait for permission. He stepped forward, brushing past me, his shoulder knocking into mine as he walked inside. His partner followed, closing the door behind him with a soft, deliberate click. "Let's have a look at that backyard," Daniel said, the corner of his mouth curling into a smirk. My chest tightened. My mind raced. This wasn't about a fine. It never had been. My pulse hammered in my ears as Daniels walked through my house like he owned the place. His partner lingered behind, standing between me and the door. That's when the panic hit. They walked through my house like they owned it, confident, entitled, as if they had done this 100 times before. Daniel strolled toward the back door, his steps slow and deliberate. His mirrored sunglasses were still on, even though we were indoors, which made it impossible to see his eyes, but I could feel them on me. Cold, calculating. His partner, shorter but built like a bulldog, stayed close behind me. He wasn't even trying to look casual. His eyes were fixed on me like he was waiting for an excuse to act. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. My breath quickened. My body knew before my brain processed it. This wasn't about a fine. This was something else. Something worse. "Where's the violation?" I forced the words out, trying to keep my voice steady. Daniels smiled just enough to show his teeth. "Oh, it's not about the violation anymore." He nodded toward his partner, who stepped back toward the door. A soft, metallic click followed as the lock slid into place. My stomach dropped. "Here's how this is going to work," Daniels said, stepping toward me, closing the distance between us. His tone sharpened, all traces of fake professionalism gone. "You're going to hand over $5,000, cash, and we'll make this whole thing disappear." My body went rigid. "What the hell are you talking about?" Daniels's smile flattened. "We know you've got money." His voice darkened, losing that smooth edge. House like this? It's worth close to $800K. Nice job. Nice neighborhood. You can afford it. He stepped closer, so close I could see my own reflection in his sunglasses. Or, he tilted his head slightly, we could report you for other violations. Noise complaints. Structural issues. Hell, maybe even an illegal business operation. My hands curled into fists. Heat surged through my chest, burning under my skin. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. This was a shakedown. They weren't even trying to disguise it. These guys were criminals, professional ones, and they were in my house. You're going to regret this, I said through clenched teeth, my pulse spiking with adrenaline. Daniel's smile widened. No, he said, his voice calm, almost amused. You're the one who's going to regret it. His partner shifted behind me. I heard the creak of the floorboard beneath his feet. They were boxing me in, trapping me. My mind was already racing, calculating. How fast could I reach the door? Would I have time to grab my phone? Could I take one of them down? My muscles tensed, ready to act. But Daniels wasn't finished talking. His smile sharpened. Be smart about this, he said, because you don't want to know what happens if you aren't. My pulse hammered in my skull. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was dangerous. Adrenaline exploded through my veins as Daniel's hand slid into his pocket. I caught the glint of metal. Gun. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I lunged forward, slamming into Daniel's chest with full force. The impact sent him stumbling backward. His gun clattered to the floor with a sharp metallic clang. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear anything else. The shorter guy moved fast. Too fast. He lunged toward me, hands outstretched, his face twisted with rage. I pivoted, grabbing the heavy glass vase from the table. Without thinking, I swung it hard. It connected with his skull with a sickening crack. His body dropped like a bag of bricks, groaning as he hit the floor. Daniels recovered too quickly. His eyes were sharp now. Predator eyes. He sprang toward me, tackling me to the ground with brutal force. My back hit the wall so hard the breath shot out of my lungs. His fist smashed into my jaw. White-hot pain shot through my skull. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to move. I twisted beneath him, shoving my knee into his side. He grunted, loosening his grip. I seized the opening and drove my fist into his throat. He stumbled back, clutching his neck and gasping for air. I scrambled to my feet, legs shaking beneath me. My head was spinning, but I forced myself toward the kitchen. My phone. I needed my phone. My fingers fumbled across the counter, knocking over a stack of mail before I finally grabbed it. I hit 911 with shaking hands. Daniel's breathless voice cut through the chaos. You're dead, he hissed, his face twisted with pure hatred. His hand was still on his throat, his breath ragged, but the venom in his voice was unmistakable. Then I heard it. The distant rise and fall of sirens, getting closer. You hear that? My voice was steady now, the adrenaline sharpening every edge. You're the ones who are screwed now. Daniel's eyes widened, not with fear, but with rage. He bolted for the door. My heart stopped. For a second, I thought he might make it. But it was too late. A squad of police cars skidded to a stop in my driveway. Red and blue lights reflected off the walls of my house as the doors flew open. Cops swarmed in, guns drawn, barking orders. Daniels froze as half a dozen weapons locked on him. His face twisted in fury as they forced him to the ground, handcuffing his wrists behind his back. His partner was already down. 2 officers were dragging him toward a squad car, his head lolling to the side, barely conscious. An officer approached me, tall, serious, hand resting on his holster. You okay? He asked, his tone calm but sharp. I took a breath, my lungs burning. My jaw throbbed, my hands were shaking, but I nodded. Yeah, I said. My eyes flicked toward Daniels, face down on the pavement. A wave of satisfaction surged through me. Better than them. Turns out Daniels and his buddy were part of a fake HOA scam that had hit over a dozen neighborhoods in the last year. They'd collected over $300,000 from terrified homeowners. The best part? They were facing multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and assault. And with the evidence I gave the police, they were looking at serious prison time. A few weeks later, I got a call from the district attorney. Daniels had cut a plea deal. He gave up the names of 2 more scammers. The whole operation was unraveling. I sat back on my couch, a cold beer in hand, and smiled to myself. They thought they could set me up. Instead, they walked straight into their own doom.